way to be saved than through the one way Jesus has provided. It's not an arbitrary claim. It's not a bigoted claim. It's just the way justice and grace work.
Fred?
Amen.
Fred here. This is not just a local parish priest saying this. This is the head of the Roman Catholic Church. I guess I have two questions. How in the world, with somebody with this point of view, how can they rise to this level? And if you're a local parish priest, you're probably just as appalled as we are in hearing about this. What is the responsibility of the rest of the Catholic Church with regards to saying, wait a minute, Pope Francis is wrong, folks?
Well, what they're going to say probably, Fred, I would think, is the Pope is not speaking what is known as ex cathedra, which means that this is just his opinion. He's not speaking as the infallible word of the Pope, in their view. So they would just dismiss it that way. But as you saw in the article, and I know Christopher will post it, the article from the Christian Post, the title of it is Pope Francis's Claim All Religions Are a Path to God, Rebuked by Clergy. So there are people rebuking him already. In fact, one guy, Joseph Strickland, was a bishop in the Roman Catholic Church, but he was dismissed last year because he kept going against what the Pope said. So people are going to have to stand up for truth. Your allegiance is not to some bishop or pope. Your allegiance should be to Jesus.
Amen.
Right.
Amen.
All right, Frank, go ahead, Alex.
Frank, what you said is great. I've said this on many a college campus. I'll say, look, Jesus claimed to be the one and only way to God. Was he right or was he wrong? Mm-hmm. And I mean, I've had students and an occasional professor say, well, he was wrong. At which point I'll say, okay, let's look at Jesus's resume. Prophesied coming, virgin-born, sinless life, miraculous deeds, raised from the dead under his own power. May I see your pedigree? Right. Okay, you're a mortal, finite sinner. Okay, the prophesied coming, sinless Son of God, rose from the dead, said he is the one and only way to heaven. It behooves us to trust Christ's assessment of what salvation is rather than fallen sinners.
Not only that, that's well said, Alex. Not only that, but notice that when people bring this objection up, they're assuming a moral standard. They're thinking that somehow God is immoral for not making more ways to get to heaven. Many of these people are not even Christians. Some of them are atheists. So I always ask them, by what moral standard are you saying this is wrong if God is indeed doing this? And look, we could talk about what about those that have never heard. We only got 1 minute left in this segment, so we can't get into all that. But the point is, it assumes a moral standard that the critic does not have in his or her worldview. So you need to point that out as well. Look, if God exists, and he does, and he is love, and he's infinitely just as well, then there's nobody in the afterlife who is ever going to say, I got a raw deal. Hey, God was unjust to me. That's impossible.
Alex, what do you got coming up this weekend? Do you know yet?
This weekend.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant Frank. Sorry about that.
Yes, we have a former FBI agent and ex-Muslim who worked under 5 presidents over 20 years. She's going to tell us about what an open border is like, why security is so lax around President Trump, and other issues. So tune in at 9 a.m. Central Time this Saturday for more.
All right. Thank you, Frank.
God bless you guys. See ya.
All right, folks, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we got more. We hope you'll join us. Thanks.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
Perhaps you have heard it, perhaps not. But even if you have heard it, it's worth repeating. The legend of the 3 trees. It goes like this. Once there were 3 trees in the forest near Jerusalem. They were baby trees, and they were discussing what they wanted to be when they grew up. One tree said that his desire when he grew up was to be made into a baby's cradle. The second tree expressed its desire. When I grow up, I want to be made into a mighty sailing vessel and explore the high seas. And then the third tree added that it wanted to be just what it was. I want to remain a tree and stay on the top of this hill and point people to God and His beauty and love. Well, the years came and went, and before long the trees were all grown up. The tree which wanted to be a cradle for a baby was cut down and made into a feeding trough. The second tree was cut down and made into a small fishing boat, which was used on the Sea of Galilee. And the third tree was cut down and made into a cross for use in a crucifixion. None of the three trees got what they wanted, it seemed. The trees learned a lesson which many grown-up humans often learn, and that is that the dreams we dream as children often don't come true in adulthood. How many of us have gotten what we wanted since we've grown up? Many a small girl has dreamed dreams of a Prince Charming rescuing her and her marrying Prince Charming and living happily ever after. And many a small boy has dreamed of becoming an important person as an adult and winning the praise of his fellow man. But let me finish the legend of the three trees. The one which was made into a feeding trough was used as a cradle for the baby Jesus. And the one which was made into a small fishing boat was used by the man Jesus to preach from. And the one which wanted to stand on the top of a hill and point people to God was used to crucify Jesus on. So it seems that each of the three trees received its wish. The only thing is that their wishes weren't fulfilled as they thought they would be. And how true to life this is. The little girl who never had her Prince Charming rescue her did fall in love with a fine young man who loved her devotedly throughout life. And the little boy who dreamed of becoming important wasn't known around the world, but to his wife and children, he was one of the most important people in all the world. Perhaps God is kinder to us than we often realize. Perhaps our childhood dreams come true more often than we think they do. We may not be able to get everything we want exactly like we want it in life, but this I believe. If we will set our sight on some high and noble goal and continue to pursue it throughout our life, there's a good chance we will reach it. For as the poet William Cooper once wrote, God moves in mysterious ways, His wonders to perform. So continue to pursue your high and noble dream. Who knows, it could come to you as it came to the three trees, by slipping in the back door.
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
As a nurse, I primarily work with children who are abused and exploited in trafficking, and I frequently see very unfair situations. We must talk about the issue of abuse. We can't base our actions on fear. We have to be faith-informed in what we do.
The Dr. Nurse Mama Show. For more from Dr. Jessica Peck, tune in at 2 p.m. Central on American Family Radio or on the podcast page at afr.net.
Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." Matthew 19:14.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
And welcome back to today's issues. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. I'm joined by Fred Jackson and Dr. Alex McFarland. Fred, why don't you go ahead and repeat the top story today that we talked about at the top of the program?
Yeah, in case you weren't listening, folks, at the top of the program, breaking news out of Lebanon this hour. And it has to do with something has happened with the pagers being carried by Hezbollah terrorists. As we mentioned, normally they would carry cell phones, but the leaders of the Hezbollah terrorist group told its members, get rid of the cell phones because Israel might track you, the signals coming from your cell phones. All right, here's what's happening right now. And Beirut is in total chaos at this hour. What has happened is that these Hezbollah terrorists were given pagers to use to communicate with one another. Here's what we know at this hour. At some point several hours ago, a message was sent to these pagers, and all of these pagers exploded. They exploded. Many of these Hezbollah, and we're talking about hundreds of Hezbollah members, all of them getting the same signal. These pagers exploded. Obviously, the speculation at this hour is that Israel probably was involved somehow, igniting a part of the technology of these pagers all at once, and these pagers have exploded. These hundreds of these Hezbollah leaders, the hospitals there in Beirut, they are pleading for people to come in and give blood because some of these terrorists have been seriously injured. We do not have on our website right now any videos, but I will tell you, there are videos out there already, cameras that were in stores, cameras in different places, cameras that are catching the chaos that's going on at hospitals there. But once again, the speculation is that the Israeli Defense Forces, as they have been known in the past to have technology and incredible, and I think you said it, Ed, God-given abilities to come up with ways to stop these terrorists. And so that's what's going on at this hour. We are following the story, and we will follow it throughout the day, obviously, and getting reaction to it.
Well, and I will make mention of the fact that Reuters, who I think was, I don't know whether they broke the story or if that was just the first news source that you read that had the story, they've updated it and said more than 1,000 people were wounded. That number probably will go up,
yes,
as they are able to tabulate the numbers of people affected by it. But an incredible story. And like Fred said, we don't rejoice at anyone being hurt, but in a sense, it is all-out war against Israel on the part of Hamas and Hezbollah. And, you know, when you attack people, they have a right to defend themselves, and it doesn't always have to be with a rocket.
And let's remind people, since October 7th of last year, Hezbollah in Lebanon, so Israel's been dealing with Hamas in Gaza.
In the south.
Yes. They've also had to deal, because Hezbollah immediately began to throw missiles and bombs into northern Israel, forcing Israelis who live in northern Israel to leave, to abandon their homes. So Hezbollah terrorists aren't nice people. As you say, Ed, this is war. And this is a tactic that Israel is attempting to use to put a stop to what Hezbollah terrorists are all about. And I think we mentioned in the early segment of the program, there is a report that the Iranian ambassador to Lebanon was standing near one of these Hezbollah terrorists. Don't know what happened as far as his physical condition. But let's remind people, Iran is bankrolling Hamas terrorists and Hezbollah terrorists.
And all over the region, they're bankrolling, you know, terrorists in Yemen. I mean, it's just, they are kind of throwing their weight around. Alex, I know we're kind of circling back to this story. We have already dealt with it. But Iran has the money to fund and bankroll these terrorist organizations because the Obama administration and the Biden administration, as bookends around the Trump administration, Trump wanted to kind of freeze assets and have all sorts of financial disciplines on Iran, and the Obama administration and the Biden administration eased off that, and all this money flowed back to Iran, and this is the way they're using it.
You know, one of the differences between liberal and conservative could be their view on human nature. And conservatism that is pro-life says, you know, people are made in God's image, people are valuable to God, but yet people have a sin nature. And look, I well remember during the Obama years talking about, he would talk about equity and fairness, and tariffs and embargoes and using financial pressure, cutting off food and things like that to try to get Middle Eastern terrorists to play nice with Israel and the rest of the world. I remember Obama would say, that's not right. Let's just believe in we're all people of good faith. But here's what needs to be said. And I mean, by the way, folks, it's been said that good leaders don't make good decisions. Good leaders make hard decisions. And it might be hard for our 21st century ears to hear, but look, there are people in this world that are evil. There are people in this world that have malice and, evil schemes against Israel and the rest of the world. And among the evil miscreants of the world are terrorists. And so, to empower terrorists, there were 3 9/11 related terrorists that the Biden administration helped spring from jail about a month ago. And by the way, giving money to Iran, they are 6th from the bottom in terms of human rights abuses in the world. But guys, we need a president and administration that understands, look, we have malice against none, but at the same time, we understand evil exists. There are wicked schemes, and we have to be reasonable and mature in our dealing with terrorists and evil people. It goes all the way. I mean, Neville Chamberlain versus Winston Churchill versus the Third Reich. Lives are saved when leaders understand that some people are evil and they have to be dealt with.
The Obama administration sent, and this was utterly shameful, sent in secret pallets stacked with $400 million of untraceable bills to Iran. Okay? Absolutely, utterly shameful. Not only just bad policy, but to your point, Alex, ignoring human nature. And when the Biden administration eased those financial restrictions and unfroze assets, they said, we were told by Iran that they were going to use that money for good purposes, for infrastructure and to help the poor. And so who believes? Who would believe a terrorist state like Iran? Who would believe them when they would say, no, humanitarian purposes, that's what we'll use this money for? And yet, since that time, they have continued to bankroll all these terrorist organizations that are creating chaos in the Middle East and trying to obliterate Israel. It really is an extraordinary recognition of the blindness of those on, not just on the radical left, but the left or even conservatives who do not give glory to God and recognize that the Bible is true in its description of human nature. Because there are conservatives who don't believe in God as well.
And by the way, TheAtlantic.com about a year ago had an article on how naive Westerners are when dealing with Islamic terrorists.
The Atlantic did?
Yeah, TheAtlantic.com. And so I guess my point in invoking that story is that, look, this is not just some preacher up on a soapbox or some right-wing conspiracy voice. Very reasoned Western academics that are willing to be honest, and TheAtlantic.com had this story. And by the way, if this came from some Christian preacher, it would be inflammatory. But TheAtlantic.com said the jihadists are the true Muslims.
Yes.
That the idea, we hear this mantra ad infinitum, Islam is a religion of peace. I mean, no, history doesn't bear that out at all. And so we have to understand, and this is only the reasonable, mature conclusion, that they believe they can lie in the cause of Allah So, like when the Obama administration,
that's part of their teaching.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you can lie to the infidel. By the way, that's us.
It's called taqiyya, I think, is what it's called.
Yeah. The Muslims would call us infidels. Hillary calls us deplorables. But but to believe that they are people of good faith who are not trying to obliterate Israel and who want to assimilate with the West, at best that's naive, and at worst it's complicit and contributing to the loss of lives and the furtherance of global instability.
Well, let me sit here for just a second on this topic, and let me get your take and then Fred's take. I don't want to ignore Fred here. But Alex, not too long ago, I think it's within the last 6 months, maybe a year, time flies and I sometimes can't remember, but Richard Dawkins, the pretty well-known atheist, one of the 4 new atheists that made such a splash in the years since 9/11, okay?
Right.
And I'm talking about Sam Harris and was it Daniel Dennett and Christopher Hitchens. Those 4 really rose to prominence in the aftermath of 9/11, and I think their thinking was all religions are dangerous. This most recent example came from Islam, but all religions are dangerous. But now some of these, at least Richard Dawkins, seems to have come to the understanding that Islam is a real problem. Richard Dawkins even called himself a cultural Christian.
Yeah.
Saw the need for Christianity, even if he doesn't believe it's true in any objective sense, that Western civilization needs Christianity to hold it together. And he was very concerned about the growing influence of Islam within the UK. Why don't you just speak to that that phenomenon, and then give Fred some time to talk about that as well.
By the way, guys, call me naive, but I really pray for Richard Dawkins to come to Christ. Even though he's been a vehement opponent of Christianity in years past, and even just the existence of God, he is a child made in God's image, a sinner for whom Christ died. I pray for him to get saved. I spent time on the phone, in person, and via email really pleading with Christopher Hitchens up until about 3 weeks before his death. Now listen to this, I had Christopher Hitchens on AFR February of 2010, and Ann Coulter had famously said, the only way to solve the problem of terrorism is go into these Islamic countries, convert the people to Christianity.
I remember that.
And kill their leaders. So Hitchens, who became pro-life before he died, his ultimate spiritual fate, I don't know, but Hitchens was on AFR with me in February of 2010, and Christopher Hitchens said, he said, I'm not saying this as any believer, but at least if they converted to Christianity, that they would stop terrorism. The only force that can stop the juggernaut of the iron sword of Sharia, the iron fist of communism, there's one force that could hold both of those at bay, and it's Christianity.
He said that.
Christopher Hitchens. And so it was March 31 of 2024. Richard Dawkins was walking through London, Easter morning of this year. And the minarets were bleating out their unsettling shriek, calling people in London to prayer. And Hitchens, later that afternoon, Easter Sunday, he said, my goodness, this is Christendom. It's Easter Sunday, the Lord's resurrection. Why in London do I hear the minarets calling Muslims to the mosque to pray? Should I not hear at least some choir singing, Christ the Lord is risen today? And I'm thinking, maybe thou art not far from the kingdom.
You're talking. You said Christopher Hitchens. You meant Richard Dawkins. Yeah.
I apologize.
No,
I apologize.
Right.
Yeah. Arch-atheist Richard Dawkins this Easter was lamenting the fact that in London he was not hearing the choirs on resurrection morning, but he was hearing the mosques.
Yeah.
Our founder, Dr. Don Wildman, I remember after 9/11, one of his statements was 9/11 was the best thing that ever happened to Islam.
Yes, I remember that.
And that was a shocking statement to make, but our founder was a bit of a prophet too.
Yeah.
Amen.
At the time, many people said that's nonsense.
Right.
But what happened was the spin machine went into action.
Yeah.
And we had the creation of Muslim student groups on university campuses, which, by the way, a lot of them are now leading the anti-Israel, anti-Jewish protests on our campuses.
Right.
All right. So all of a sudden, the mainstream media starts saying, as you just alluded to a few moments ago, Alex, that Islam is a peaceful religion. No, it's not. If you really study their history, the real Muslims are the Islamic terrorists because they believe they have the right to force their religion on everybody.
Yes.
All right. So, what has happened, though, in the West, where it's a long way from 9/11, and so the appeasement machines went into activity in the UK, in places of Europe like Germany. Well, a lot of people on the British Isles have learned about what the real agenda of Islam is. I think it's in Liverpool, where there's a very large population of Islam. There have been attacks from some of these Muslims. Just last week, there was a story out of Germany where the German government, which is not driven by Christianity by any stretch of the imagination, they have now set up very serious roadblocks to every entry into Germany to start screening because they allowed, under their political correctness, they've allowed this inflow of migrants mainly from the Muslim world.
Right.
And all kinds of crimes, all kinds of attacks against people. And so now they're setting up a stronger border barrier than we have in the United States right now. So the West, it takes a lot, but it begins to learn their ideology, which says, we need to be nice, they're really nice people, and then reality hits.
Right.
Reality has hit the UK, reality has hit Europe to a certain extent here, but I worry about what's happening in this country. I'm not wishing for another Islamic terrorist attack in this country.
Absolutely not. Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I fear it.
Yes.
I fear it.
No, you'd have to not be paying attention to not fear it.
Yeah.
Right? Because we've known for a while now with the Biden administration and that wide open border that there were people coming across. Even the FBI, Christopher Wray, has had to admit, he's said on several occasions, that all sorts of red flags. We are, closer to another big terrorist attack than we have been for a long, long time. That people have come across this border, people that have been caught at the border, southern border, who are on the terrorist watch list. Who knows how many have come across and have set up sleeper cells?
Yes,
waiting for the opportune moment to drop the hammer on innocent American citizens. So we'll continue to watch these things. I wanted to kind of sit on that for just a minute and discuss the fact that, and let me just throw this right back at Alex just for a minute. I don't want to. We do have other stories to get to, but there are famous people, famous atheists like Tom Holland, the historian, who wrote a wonderful book called Dominion. Alex, you probably have read it. But increasing numbers of people who are not Christian. I would say Jordan Peterson, he may be a Christian by now. I don't know. But we're seeing people who have been at least on the edges seem to be waking up to the importance of Christianity to the culture of Western civilization, and some perhaps even, they're on the bank and might actually slip in and fall in and become Christians. But what do you think of that phenomenon? Is it just because of the enormous pressure that Western civilization is under? Is this part of the move of God's Spirit, or both?
Well, I do think the Spirit of God is moving, and maybe people initially become open to the net positive that Christianity is. Maybe it's pragmatism. It's like, well, wait a minute. It's better when people behave morally. You know, one of the people that has given some, at least, you know, a tip of the hat to the goodness of Christianity has been Michael Shermer, you know. And
from the skeptic group?
Yeah, who I know very well. And Shermer, you know, years and years and years ago had been part of the Jesus movement of the 70s, and then he became a professed atheist. But people begin to say, wait a minute, whether or not God exists, whether or not Christianity is true, it is better when people think God is watching and therefore they behave more morally than they otherwise might have behaved. It's a net positive. And then, like Jordan Peterson, I was talking with Oz Guinness at the Values Voters Summit last fall, and it's, you know, we need to pray for the Canadian psychologist Jordan Peterson, one of the most influential intellects in the world.
Right.
And I listened to Ben Shapiro, whom I have interviewed. And these guys are like, wait a minute, Christianity is good. Christianity is empirically verified by historical facts. Christianity changes lives. The dishonest become honest. The promiscuous become virtuous. The killers become loving. Maybe this thing is not only good, but it's true. And so, again, guys call me naive, but I'm praying for the Spirit of God to use these turbulent times to wake people up and even bring people into a personal relationship with Christ. That is the world's ultimate best hope.
Well, you know, Fred, this was what Alex has just explained. This was the view of the founding fathers of this country. They believed that liberty was a gift from God to human beings, that it would unleash just unbelievable creativity and wealth and blessing, which has happened in the United States, even with all our flaws, okay? But they said political prosperity depends upon two pillars. This was George Washington in his farewell address. The pillars of religion and morality uphold political prosperity. And not all the founders, I think the vast majority of them were Bible-believing Christians, but not all of them were. But they understood just what Alex said, that you have to have a moral society of people who are restraining their own sinful impulses to allow liberty. If you don't have those people doing that, the government has to get bigger.
Yes, and the reason they were willing to say that is because history has shown it.
Yes.
History has shown that when those pillars begin to crumble, a society crumbles.
Yes.
That's what happens. I think you wrote an article for the Journal.
Yeah, I did years ago.
Many years ago.
Yeah.
It is worth reading that article again, folks, because it has been proven in history when those pillars are attacked, when they begin to deteriorate, a culture cannot survive.
Right. And that's why a republic or a democracy always gives way to dictatorship when it fails, because the government has to grow so large and so powerful to restrain sinful impulses. All right, 5-minute break for news, folks. More good stuff directly ahead.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
Man, we have such a culture war against God's ways. I really wish I could make a more positive impact.
If that's you, you can. AFA President Tim Wildman invites you to join AFA Action Alerts. Sign up to receive 2 weekly emails with calls to action on foundational family, national, and Christian matters. Prayerfully sign up on the alerts page at afaaction.net.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. Hundreds of Hezbollah terrorists are seriously wounded after the pagers they used to communicate exploded. Mike Tobin reports from Tel Aviv.
As many as 1,000 Hezbollah fighters have suddenly been injured rather seriously. The pagers that they were wearing suddenly play an audio message and then explode, resulting in serious injury. And we're talking again, Reuters news agency is saying that as many as 1,000 people were injured. So that creates this scene where you've got all of the ambulances scrambling all over Beirut and places south of Beirut to try to deal with the overwhelming number of injured that they have right now. These pagers, apparently, according to 3 different security sources who were speaking to the Reuters news agency, were the latest wave of pagers that these Hezbollah operatives were getting, with the belief that this was secure communication, that Israel couldn't tap into whatever they were saying.
Following the second assassination attempt on President Donald Trump, the U.S. Secret Service is under increasing pressure to explain how it could happen. Missouri Republican Senator Josh Hawley.
Well, the solution is there needs to be accountability at the top. As I asked Director Rowe under oath almost 2 months ago, who have you fired? Who is being held accountable for what happened in Butler? And we're going to have the same set of questions for what happened over the weekend. We need to see real accountability, Bill, number one. Number two, we need to see changes in protocols. This needs to happen immediately. They can't keep doing the same thing over and over.
President Trump joined Fox News at Night for an exclusive interview, the former president laying out his plan for the economy and to bring prices down.
If we bring energy down, that means interest rates are going to come down, and we're going to get interest rates down, and we're going to get them down very fast. So between those elements, you're going to have a roaring economy.
Meanwhile,
when I talk about building an opportunity economy, it is very much with the mind of investing in the ambitions and aspirations.
Fox News contributor David Webb says Kamala has no plan.
Personal gibberish, not actual policy. When she got to what sounded like policy, the economics don't add up. How do you prove that you deserve a $50,000 tax subsidy at the expense of the taxpayer? Is there a pro forma? Is there a prospectus for the business plan? What agency processes this? That doesn't happen. The opportunity economy, $25,000 towards a new home, or builders who are going to magically build because of tax subsidies these major homes. Major groups that build affordable housing around the country are not going to do this. They're going to lose money, so you're going to have to give them more taxpayer money just to get them to do it.
A law firm dedicated wholly to election integrity wants South Carolina to be transparent with its voter rolls. Chad Groening has more.
This week, the Public Interest Legal Foundation began oral arguments in its suit against the executive director of the South Carolina Election Commission, Howard Knapp. The lawsuit alleges that by refusing to provide the foundation with a copy of the statewide voter roll, the state is violating Section 8 of the National Voter Registration Act of 1993. Lauren Bowman-Biss is Director of Communications and Engagement at PILF.
Under federal law, the National Voter Registration Act, voter rolls are required to be public documents. They denied the Public Interest Legal Foundation access to the voter roll, saying that because we weren't a South Carolina resident or organization, they didn't have to give it to us under their state law.
So Biss says they filed their current lawsuit.
We filed a lawsuit basically saying that federal law trumps state law. National Voter Registration Act requires you to make this information available to the public. And the reason it's important is kind of getting back to what I was saying at the beginning, what the voter roll actually is, the list of eligible voters. You can't really hold your election officials accountable to make sure things like people who have passed away or moved away or aliens who shouldn't be registered are on the rolls if you can't even get a copy of that list.
Biss says PLIF has fought and won access to the voter rolls in Maine, Maryland, and Illinois. Additionally, the foundation has an active case against Hawaii for failing to maintain and provide a statewide voter roll for public inspection. I'm Chad Groening.
U.S. stocks are rising toward more records as Wall Street continues to expect bigger than usual relief for the economy to arrive Wednesday through a coming cut to interest rates. More news online at afn.net and download the AFN mobile app for your Apple or Android device. I'm Rusty Pugh.
Interested in seminary but don't think it will work in this season in life? Wesley Biblical Seminary offers flexible options that allow you to take classes live, no matter where you are. At WBS, we don't just educate people, we develop trusted leaders for faithful churches. It's time for you to respond to the calling God has on your life. Take classes from an institution that you can trust for a calling that will not go away. Learn more about your opportunities at wbs.edu. That's wbs.edu.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Ed Vitagliano.
And welcome back, everybody. Ed Vitagliano sitting in for Tim Wildman this week. I am joined by Dr. Alex McFarland, and now Chris Woodward has joined us. Fred Jackson has gone back to the bullpen to do his daily routine. So welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Welcome to the big show.
Thank you
Chris.
very much. Glad to be here. If I could give this segment a name for today, I would call it Things Trending on X.
All right. Well, start us off.
All right. Something that's had a lot of people talking for a couple of days now, and understandably so, was this very interesting exchange between Republican Vice Presidential nominee and Senator J.D. Vance. He was on CNN State of the Union program a couple of days ago, and then host Dana Bash had several things to ask him about the Trump-Vance campaign's repeated claims that migrants in Springfield, Ohio, some of them, maybe eating people's pets, cats, dogs, things like that. This is something that's been around for a while. Trump even brought it up in the debate with Kamala Harris. Go back and watch that if you need more information. This cut was too long to just play in its entirety, so I have broken it up into two parts. Here is a part where Dana Bash is asking J.D. Vance about inciting bomb threats in Springfield, Ohio, with these constant claims that migrants, some of them, may be eating people's pets, and then we'll go from there. Clip 11.
Nobody is disputing that the town of Springfield, Ohio, needs help. But you're not just a bystander. You're the senator from Ohio. So instead of saying things that are wrong and actually causing the hospitals, the schools, the government buildings to be evacuated because of bomb threats, because of the cats and dogs thing, why not actually be constructive in helping to better integrate them into the community?
So Senator Vance took that as her saying that he was responsible for inciting bomb threats, and he tried to correct the record, defend himself. She kept interrupting. And finally, Mr. Vance had enough and said this to Dana Bash on her own program, on her own network, clip 12.
Dana, would you like to ask me questions and then let me answer them, or would you like to debate me on these topics? I noticed that when you had Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, you gave them multiple choice answers to the questions that you asked, and you allowed them to answer the questions. I'm happy to be here to talk about policy, but if you're going to interrupt me every single time that I open my mouth, then why am I even doing this? So please ask a question, and I'd ask you to be polite enough to let me answer it.
Listen, this was a very contentious interview. And Alex, I got to tell you, it is clear, and it has been clear for a long time. This sounds like I've been on a deserted island for the last 10 years. But I'm just saying, it just becomes so starkly clear that the leftist media, including CNN and Dana Bash, she was absolutely rude to J.D. Vance, and he's absolutely right, Alex, that when she interviewed Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, her vice presidential candidate, she was kind, and when she asked questions, she said, is the answer this or is the answer that? Almost not only softball questions, but giving hints to the answers.
Oh, my goodness. Well, whenever they're interviewing Kamala or Tim Walz, they're softball questions, and whenever it's a conservative or Trump or Vance, it's gotcha questions. Right. And did you notice her accusatory tone? Instead of saying things that are wrong, hey, I applaud J.D. Vance for, being proactive and saying, look, give me a chance to answer the question, or let's just go and have a debate. Of course, we know that that's not going to happen because, it wouldn't be a fair fight anyway, would it?
No, it wouldn't. I got to tell you, I'm looking forward to the vice presidential debate between J.D. Vance and Tim Walz. Do you know offhand when that you're looking it up?
It's October 1st on CBS. If the Lord tarries, we will be here to cover it that evening, with my brother from another mother, Robert Thornton, anchoring that night.
I would try to stop you from saying that every time, but you can't help yourself, can you?
That's my thing.
Yes.
Hey, we don't know when the Lord's going to return.
No, that's true.
And I'm not going to be one of those people quoting the Book of Revelations says, or I'm not one of those people.
All right.
I may be from the South, but
so anyway, that was an excellent exchange. J.D. Vance does very well. I am looking forward to the debate, the vice presidential debate. Tim Walz is no pushover either. He's a longtime
it'll be good.
politician. That's going to kind of be probably a slugfest.
I think
between
so.
Those two.
And I've said for a long time now, I've been here since 2010. I've covered all the debates, presidential and vice presidential. I would like to see more than one debate between the vice presidential nominees. The reason being, these guys, or women, are a heartbeat away from the presidency. So I need to know more about you rather than what the moderators strategically picked in the way of questions.
Yes.
That's just me.
All right.
Yeah.
All right, what else we got?
Yes, something else that has had a lot of people talking, and understandably so, was current Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris. She did a one-on-one interview, sort of, with a reporter who had a question for her on how exactly she's going to help people and the economy, and she gave what many have deemed a nonsensical answer. Clip 8.
Making life more affordable for people. Yeah. What are one or two specific things you have in mind for that?
Well, I'll start with this. I grew up a middle-class kid. We as Americans have a beautiful character. You know, we have ambitions and aspirations and dreams, but not everyone necessarily has access to the resources that can help them fuel those dreams and ambitions. So when I talk about building an opportunity economy, it is very much with the mind of investing in the ambitions and aspirations.
All right, so Alex, her economic plans have been, the details have been scant, and they are filled with platitudes.
Yeah.
There was initial comments about price controls. I don't know whether that would include wage controls. She throws around the words aspirations a lot. I certainly understand that it's a true statement that not everyone has the economic wherewithal to go after their dreams. I know that's a true statement. Not everyone can open up a business and those kinds of things. But I didn't hear anything in that answer and have not really heard anything that would help the middle class or the people who are struggling to pay the light bill, fill the car up with gas, and buy groceries.
Yeah, I mean, liberalism sells itself to an often gullible population by promises and platitudes. You know, and I've said this. If you look during the debate, Trump, whether you like him or not, Kamala Harris, whether you're hopeful or optimistic, but look, Trump and conservatism in general is about principles and policies. Liberalism, in the case of Kamala Harris, Marxism, is about promises and platitudes and people groups. Look, the best way to give opportunity and a chance to succeed is a free market economy, a strong economy, personal opportunity, but also personal accountability. And I pray that the American people will have the presence of mind not to just bite the hook of a tax and spend liberal throwing out eons of empty promises. The beautiful thing about America is that you have opportunity. The reality is you got to get up and work. You've got to live within your means. You've got to engage in self-discipline. And here's something that socialism obstructs. See, a free market, conservative, constitutional, Judeo-Christian republic gives you the chance not only to work and achieve your dreams, but your character is purged and strengthened in the process. You know, we all can think of examples in life where we had to engage in self-discipline, deferred gratification. We had to work hard and get up early and be on time. And we did the jobs we didn't want to do at the moment because it would get us to the place where we could do the job we did want to do.
Right.
But socialism says, no, you can't make it without me. I mean, it's like the pimp who says to, the drug dealers, the drug users, and the streetwalkers, hey, you can't make it without your daddy. You better, get in my fold. Look, I want to say to the American people, no, you can make it. You plus God plus your moral character, you'll make it. You don't need government to be your babysitter or your handholder. You can make it. Believe in God, believe in truth, believe in yourself, and do not believe in the vacuous, soul-crushing lies, promises of the left.
Well, Alex went all street on us there talking. Listen, a perfect example of what you're talking about, Alex, the empty promises and the oftentimes shallow response of people who say, oh, free money, is Kamala Harris. I think she said this during the debate. She said she wants to give $25,000 to people who are in, I guess, below the poverty line so that they can buy their first house.
Right.
It's a down payment. Okay. And when I heard that, my first reaction, was, what do you think that's going to do to the price of houses?
Exactly.
I mean, people are going to say, oh, folks have $25,000 in their pocket from the federal government. I'm going to raise the price of my house $25,000. Listen, housing is obviously, in this country right now, hard to afford, whether it's rental or buying. And this kind of plan is going to hurt more. But the initial reaction to that is, wow, 25 grand, sign me up. I think I'll vote for Kamala.
Well, and that's not even 10%. The average median home sale price in the U.S. was $412,300, according to the Federal Reserve, just earlier this year. So 25 grand is not even 10% towards a home.
Yeah.
So people might say, well, they can come up with another 16,000, but the odds of that in this economy, when you're having to make ends meet and choose, a doctor bill versus keeping the lights on and all these other things, that's not going to happen. Housing is a problem. A lot of people on the right have admitted that to being a problem. Now, she wants to also, in addition to giving people 25 grand, she wants to do some things that would encourage building homes, whereas a lot of people on the right say you need to cut a lot of red tape to get government out of the way.
Yeah.
While having a energy plan that makes sense, and all these things are going to factor in and lower inflation. But her plan, as of right now, does not look like she is in favor of or looking at going in that direction.
Yeah. All right. Next story.
Well, let's mention this because it is an update to something we have discussed on this program. I do not have the audio from the individual, but many of our dedicated listeners might remember earlier this year when we brought in audio of a man who prefers to be identified as a migrant influencer. This is that guy on TikTok and some other social media platforms earlier this year that was caught on video, or actually purposely on video, bragging about taking government handouts and even encouraging squatting in homes, things of that nature. 27-year-old Lionel Marino bragged about making over $1,000 per week on TikTok. But the update with this story is a judge in Ohio has ordered that Lionel Marino be deported. So he appears to be going back to where he comes from, south of the border. Fox does say whether or not
Venezuela. I think.
Whether or not Marino will actually be deported is up in the air. But a judge has ordered him to be deported. So stay tuned for this ongoing story here.
Wow. So he'll be deported, and he will never try to get back into this country again.
You're right. Many of the people that have been arrested for
serious crimes.
Serious crimes. Come to find out, they've been deported several times. I mean, there have been even traffic crashes involved people that were, told to leave, and they came back at some point. So a big update here from this story that we brought you earlier.
And this is one of those things where social media, people just don't think on social media. So Moreno goes on, becomes his posts go viral as he teaches people who are in the country illegally how to beat the system, how to get free stuff, encourages, as you mentioned, people to squat in homes to get money or to get homes. That makes him come into the public eye. And as a result, Immigration and Customs Enforcement find out about this guy and find out he's not been showing up to his required check-ins, and that leads to him, at least the judge's decision is for him to be deported. But all this started because he was being a wise guy on TikTok and social media. Alex,
he overplayed his hand.
Yeah.
So he said on social media, he said, and I quote, "I didn't cross the Rio Grande to work like a slave.
Yeah,
I came to America to mark my territory."
Well, he probably would have continued to get away with it if he had not been so brazen in his disrespect for the laws of this country and the laws, the laws guaranteeing ownership of property, private property.
Right.
So this has become a real problem with people squatting, and then you have to go through the civil court. Sometimes people give up because they can't get these people out of their homes.
By the way, I'm sure most people will remember the Great Recession of 2008 and all of these subprime mortgages, and there were tens of thousands of homes foreclosed upon. That was during the Obama years when Obama, and by the way, it's always disastrous when the government forcibly inserts itself into an economy. But there were all these people that were given mortgage loans. I remember this well, and they couldn't afford it. And talking about Kamala promising a $25,000 down payment, well, then there's this little issue called the monthly payment. And two things here. I mean, government housing goes back to LBJ, and even as we speak, there are government subsidized housing projects that are just these black holes of crime and violence, drug distribution, and they go back 55, 60 years. It's been terrible because giving people stuff without moral character and ownership and initiative and some skin in the game, it never works. But I would say if Kamala is elected, heaven forbid, and if they just begin to hand out checks for $25,000, look, they're going to raise the debt ceiling. The national debt will further increase. I mean, think about this. When Obama took office, the national debt was something like 16 to 19 trillion. Today it's 33 trillion. We're fast approaching the point where interest on the debt, $3 billion a day, guys, $3 billion a day, the interest on the debt is increasing. What are we going to do when the interest payments surpass our national collective annual GDP? And then we're just going to have more banks fail, more mortgages that are defaulted upon. This is not the way to house a nation, and it's certainly not the way to manage an economy.
Well, the U.S. in 2024, the federal government has paid more than $1 trillion in gross interest payments on its debt.
Yeah.
So we're not just talking about trying to bring the debt down. Just the interest payments on that debt have already gone over $1 trillion for 2024, and we still have several months remaining. So to your point, Alex, at some point, what happens when the debt grows so large that the payment for the interest exceeds the revenues we take in? That means you can't, without going further in debt, you can't pay for the military, you can't pay Social Security, you can't pay anything that the federal government does. And when that happens, the government goes broke. And that causes a worldwide depression, not just one in this country, when money becomes worthless. And there's, according to what Kamala Harris has said her administration would do, there's not going to be any stopping the piling on of further debt on this country. And you know what? That probably would be in the top 3 issues of people, voters, if we didn't have all these other problems, all these problems with immigration, with crime, with the border, all those kinds of things, inflation, which is tied to our debt. We're in a serious problem, and promising even more government spending is not the way to cure it.
And let me say this, and I'll hush, because, Chris, I apologize for talking so much. But, I mean, here we are. By the way, in the year 2000, due to Reagan tax cuts, really, and the growth of the economy, the budget was balanced. There was actually a surplus 24 years ago. The national debt was getting paid down. And here's the thing about Harris, and I'm being a little bit sarcastic, but I'm pleading with people. The economy falls. The nation is insolvent. The debt is growing. Oh, but at least we didn't vote for that rude man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I will say this. News media does not help the debt situation. News media, by and large, kind of avoids or doesn't do enough stories on the debt problem and accurately explaining it to people how much debt we're in and why it matters to you. We can't really combat crime and do a lot of the things we want to do based on the outrageous, and that's being kind, debt that we're in. If we had more money to do, use around it, we could do a lot of things, but instead we're having to spend all this stuff, and it involves a lot of math, and it's not as exciting as, hey, these people crossed the river illegally, and there are one and many people coming over here, and all these other things. It does need more attention. I am glad you guys are talking about it today because I do my best to cover it, but there is a lot to go on. There's a lot going on that does require our attention. So thank you.
And the fact is that once a large enough percentage of the voting population gets to the point where they refuse to consider any austerity measures, when they insist, no, you want me to vote for you, you've got to promise. You get a large enough percentage of the population who are voting for people who are going to keep sending them money. Alex, I don't know where that ends other than in insolvency.
Yeah. I mean, it is jeopardizing. By the way, as you all know, many of our assets are leveraged to foreign countries, namely China. We're in a dangerous position. I mean, we could give a lot of things that we would say we wish candidates would champion, but let me say people that would seriously look at cutting spending and addressing this, locomotive bearing down on us called the national debt. I mean, that's who we ought to be electing, people that would seriously say, look, we've got to keep our nation, and the debt absolutely jeopardizes our survival.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a frightening situation, and listen, I blame both political parties for this.
Yeah, true.
The Republican Party used to be the party that called for fiscal responsibility. Mm-hmm. I blame George W. Bush. I do, but I don't. He understood from the election of Bill Clinton that in order to get elected, you have to promise spending on X, Y, and Z. So that's what he started doing when he was running in 2000. And the Republicans have long ceased to be the party of fiscal responsibility. And I would also say that politicians on both sides, and there are exceptions, by the way, there are people like Rand Paul and Ron Paul before him who have demanded fiscal responsibility. But members of Congress, their number one job is to get reelected. If you had people in office who said, no, my number one job is to do what's good for our country, even if I don't get reelected, you might have more people demanding fiscal responsibility. All right, folks, with that, we are done. More great programming directly ahead on AFR. Hope you'll stay tuned. Lord willing, we will see you right back here tomorrow.
You know, there are many ways we can impact the world around us. Some are more direct, like helping our neighbors and serving in our churches. Other ways are broad, like becoming community leaders or supporting missions. Of course, taking care of our